Welcome to another episode of the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, episode number 9. Cinematography is infinite in its possibilities, much more than music or language. The late, great cinematographer, Conrad Hall.
Broadcasting from the back alley in Hollywood, it's the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, where we show you how to survive and thrive as an indie filmmaker in the jungles of the film biz. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Thanks, guys, for tuning in for another week of the Indie Film Hustle Podcast. Just want to remind you guys to head on over to freefilmbook.com. That's freefilmbook.com. Get your free audiobook. I like the film books, but they have over 40,000 different audiobooks that you can download. My free gift to you guys. So this week we have an amazing guest. He's a longtime friend of mine, Suki. Now, please forgive me, Suki. Suki Medencevic. Suki's an ASC cinematographer. If you don't know what an ASC cinematographer is, you will learn after the show what an ASC cinematographer is. He's been a cinematographer for decades now, not to make him feel old or anything, but I've known him for over a decade as well. Suki's a really good friend of mine, and he teaches over at USC, at New York Film Academy, and a few other places as well. And I thought he'd be an amazing guest to talk about cinematography, the art of cinematography, and also working on his new show, American Horror Story. Now, one thing he did not discuss, or we didn't get a chance to discuss, or I forgot to ask, for him to tell this amazing story that he had with Steve Jobs. I always call Suki the most interesting man in the world. He is very worldly. He's shot all over the world. His stories are legendary, to say the least. And he has this one story with Steve Jobs. He was shooting a documentary for Pixar, and Steve Jobs, he was going to shoot an interview with Steve Jobs, the late great Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs came in and started being Steve Jobs. You know, he's like, hey, I want to move this here, I want to move this there, that. And Suki, coming from Bosnia, I guess the more European vibe of who is Suki, he just didn't care who Steve Jobs was, and he just like, no, this is how we're going to shoot it, and this is why we're going to move this here, we're going to put the lights here, and we're going to put the camera here. And Steve, from what Suki told me, Steve basically just looked at him and he goes, explain to me why you're doing it. And Suki explained to him the purposes of why he was doing it, and he goes, okay, no problem. But when Suki said no to Steve Jobs, the entire crew, the director, everyone, you could feel a pin drop. The director came up afterwards, like, what did you do? What did you do? And he goes, look, Mr. Jobs might know how to make iPhones, but he doesn't know how to light a scene. I do. He has no idea about lenses or cameras or anything like that. I do. That's my specialty. I'm not going to go into his place and tell him how to make an iPhone. So that is who we are dealing with here with Suki, and that's why I love him so much. He is very honest, very straightforward, an extremely funny guy, and he's just an amazing, not only a talent as a cinematographer, but a great person. So without further ado, here is the world-famous Suki. Suki, thank you so much for joining us on the Indie Film Hustle podcast. We are grateful for you coming on to the show.
Well, I'm very happy to be part of the show.
So for you guys that don't know, Suki and I are good friends. We go way back. We met over, it's getting close to almost 13, 14 years ago now, something like that. And we've been friends ever since, even from my days in Florida. We always stayed in touch, and he always told me to move out to LA as soon as possible. And what was the thing you told me about moving out to LA?
Well, there's the
regret.
The main thing was, I guess, if you want to make it in Hollywood, you have to be in Hollywood, California, not in Hollywood, Florida. So that's the...
And that the only thing I would regret not moving to LA is I didn't do it sooner.
Right.
And exactly. In many ways, you were correct, sir. But I'm out here, and I've been out here for a while now. So thank you for that. So let's get into it. So Suki, one thing I when we worked together, you told me about your film school experience, which was a very unique film school experience as opposed to film school experiences here in America. Can you tell us a little bit about your school, where you went to school, and how does it differ from American film school?
Well, the school I actually went to 2 film schools. My very first film school was in Yugoslavia, in the town Belgrade, which was the capital of Yugoslavia. And it's a school of dramatic arts that pretty much covers theater, film, television, and acting too. So cinematography is one of the just departments there. And unlike schools in the United States, or most schools in the United States, that particular school um, basically has a program, master program for every department that you actually majoring right away, and you're studying for 4 years. Your field, and you basically, whatever you choose, editing, cinematography, directing, that's what you get master degree. Beautiful thing about the school is that it's free, and like most of the schools in Europe. But the biggest challenge is to get in the school, because the school is very limited. They take only 5 students a year per department. Per department, yes. So that's kind of, competition is huge, and if
It's
you're
like
lucky to get in,
it's like Fame.
yeah, it is. It is, because it's it's very expensive school, so therefore they cannot have like 20, 30 students of cinematography, and also the program is scheduled and structured. The whole curriculum is structured in a way that graduates from the school can immediately get a job in industry or in production. So there will be not like unemployed cinematographers or directors. Basically, there is a certain guarantee that you will be employed right after the school. But one thing I did was kind of a little bit unusual. As I was already in the third year in school in Belgrade, I went to Prague to visit a friend who at the time was at a very famous, one of the most famous film schools in the world, FAMU, which is a national film school in Czechoslovakia back then. And I came to visit my friend over at Prague Film School, and I instantly fell in love with the school, with the city, with the whole vibe, with all energy, and basically decided to drop out from the Belgrade school, even though I had only one more year left to get my degree, go to Prague, start from the beginning, and basically repeat my school for another 4 years, 4.5 years. And it was kind of crazy at the time. Nobody believed that there is any logic in it. And to me, it was just kind of a gamble, because I felt if I ever get accepted in that school will get me far better preparation and really make me ready for my career as a cinematographer, which proved to be true.
Now, can you tell me that story? You told me this years ago. I don't know if you remember it or not. How they prepare you for like the kind of questions they ask on a test about the girl with the bra by the lake. Like how long do you have between the time she takes off the bra to shoot a scene?
Yeah.
Can you explain that? Because I found that fascinating when you told it to me years ago.
One of the questions that you would have in the written test if you're filming the girl by the lake and in the morning, and how much earlier she has to be ready for the scene to be shot properly. And of course, you have to think about all these details, not only light composition, but also detail about the wardrobe, because if she's wearing tight outfit and if she's wearing a bra, if she takes it off too soon, there will be marks, like on
bra marks, of course.
Yeah, bra marks, and then of course it takes about at least in an hour for bra marks to kind of fade out, so you have actually nice smooth skin that you can photograph. And these are kind of important things you have to, as a cinematographer, think about. So it's not always about lighting and composition and movement, and it's much more kind of like comprehensive approach to cinematography.
Now, I know a lot of you're an ASC member. And I know a lot of people, especially in the Film Hustle community, might not know what ASC stands for or what it is or how even you get into this kind of exclusive club. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Well, ASC stands for American Cinematographer Society, and it's the organization founded in 1919 by a group at the time, Hollywood cinematographers, with the goal to preserve the artistry and integrity of cinematographers' profession. So it's also a support club that creates the community of higher respected professionals, where in very friendly and relaxed environment, we can exchange all our ideas, get advices, complain about, get a drink, things like that. Basically,
it's a fraternity almost.
It's kind of fraternity. It's kind of like place where you have like safe haven, and And it's been also a place which really nurtures artistry of cinematography and keeps the level of our craft and our art to the highest standards. And based on American Cinematographer Society's structure, many other countries.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
Have formed the same organizations, basically modeled off the American Cinematographer Society, and I think it's a great way to keep cinematographers, especially nowadays when everything's so global, keep us all together and keep exchange of ideas and information to the maximum. So how do you become there? Well, how you become a member of American Cinematographer Society, it's the organization that is by invitation only. So you cannot apply for it. There's no application form. You have to be invited by at least three active members of the ASC. They have to invite you, and then they have to write a letter of recommendation to the membership board. American Cinematographer Society is very active in many aspects. They have education board, science and technology board, which is one of the very, very important groups, also has educational, reach out, international, dinners. We have our dinners when we have movies and discussions, and so there's a lot of subcommittees within the American Cinematographer Society. So one of the subcommittees for the members, the group which is open, and any member of American Cinematography belongs to that group. Basically, everybody has right to interview and ask questions any prospective candidate and find out if the candidate meets standards and requirements of the ASC, not only based on their work, but you have to share certain values which are common among cinematographers, and if the committee finds you suitable candidate, then board has to approve, but then it goes to all the members of the ASC to finally give agreement. If there is one, basically you have to be unanimously accepted. If there is one rejection, you will not be able to.
Wow, really?
Yes, and that has to do with the. If you treated down the line in your career at some point, if you treated your crew members or somebody unfairly, unprofessionally, you never know when this can come back to you and haunt you and maybe pay a very high price. So professional integrity is one of the highest values that the American Cinematographer Society holds.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So I always was fascinated at how you got in and what the process was. So thank you for sharing that. Now, when you're working with a director, what do you look for in a director? Indie filmmaker or indie director or just regular director?
Well, it really, it varies. Like I'm looking always, with every director, I'm looking for a partner, somebody who can speak the same language I do, visually, cinematically, somebody who is passionate about what they do, somebody who is able to challenge me. And I would say probably the most successful collaborations I had came from directors who would challenge me in a way that as a cinematographer, I will have to come up with a solution to the ideas the director might have. And my job as a cinematographer is to facilitate this idea and to facilitate the vision. And but also I like to challenge the director. Also, if I see the director sometimes is going very safe path in the process of filmmaking, playing it safe, it's never a good option. Never gets you anywhere. So you have to be able to find your own identity, find your own language, find your own way to express yourself, but be slightly different. And that's when you look at all these great directors, why they are who they are is because they have a recognizable style and they never played it safe.
Very cool. Now, when you're when you're choosing a camera for your project, how do you choose a camera for your project? Is it budget? Is it look? What are the factors?
Well, it's very interesting how things have changed when it comes down to position of cinematographer in all the process. It used to be not a long time ago that cinematographer is the one who decides what camera will be used, what lenses, what the film stock, what the lab, what the processing, what the finishing. Basically, cinematographers was completely in control of whole visual and technology aspect of the filmmaking. With arrival of digital technology and and arrival of the new category called owner-operator, basically, market gets flooded with people who were able to afford and purchase the equipment. Cameras, they became much more affordable and much more accessible. So the choice of the tools for your work became something that sometimes would be already decided before cinematographer gets hired. And especially during the red craze about 10 years ago, when everybody was really trying to jump on a bandwagon and buy the most amazing digital camera that can provide you with 4K or whatever resolution for...
It's 25K now, 25K.
Yeah, it's going there. But as we know, more K, the better picture.
Of course, you don't even need a cinematographer anymore, right?
No, you don't. And they actually have these new cameras which doesn't even need a light. So
yeah, I've seen those cameras too. It's actually quite incredible.
Yeah, you don't need light, you don't need cinematographer. You just press the button and make sure you have fresh battery. But going back to the answer how you choose your equipment, I was fortunate on most of my project to insist that we use particular camera or particular lens or particular approach or process or post-production workflow, because it is part of what I do as a cinematographer. So how the image is captured in many ways defines how the final look after the post-production and color manipulation, color correction how the image is going to look like. So yes, I always try to bring my expertise and my knowledge, of course, within the budget. And very often people, especially in production, they think if you are asking for some higher end piece of equipment that's out of price range, which is not true. You would be surprised that sometimes much easier you would be able to afford something that is really high end. It's something that everybody wants. So the only advice I could give to any filmmaker is think about the story, think about what you really need, and then take it from there. I remember somebody recently, some of my colleagues from the ASC talk about shooting a film on Super 16. Mm-hmm. Very, very good budget, decent budget, but deciding to go Super 16 for aesthetic reasons.
Wow.
And it made perfect sense to go Super 16 because they wanted to get this kind of like old, grainy kind of feel.
Like the wrestler.
Yeah, like the wrestler, for instance. This one is particularly talking. It's called the Paperboy.
Yeah, I've heard about that one. Yeah.
Yeah, shot by Roberto Schaefer. So, I mean, it should be your aesthetic creative choice. And like currently, I'm working on American Horror Story as additional tandem unit cinematographer with amazing Michael Goy ASC cinematographer who was Emmy nominated and also used to be president of the ASC. So Michael Goy created actually style for the film for this particular TV show is by shooting on film on 35 millimeter. And we are actually shooting on 35 millimeter. Film is already the TV series is already in its 5th season, being shot on Panavision cameras, 35 millimeter Kodak film, and it works.
One of the few shows that is being shot on film, right?
Yes, one of the few. Not only they shoot on 35 millimeter Kodak, they shoot on black and white 35. They shoot on color reversal, 16, Super 8, you name it. It's been all used on that show.
Oh, nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
Now, can you explain the difference between prime and zoom lenses for our audience?
Well, the basic difference between prime and zoom lenses is that with a zoom lens, you can change your viewing angle without taking lens off from from the camera body. And zoom lenses, well, without going too much into history, zoom lenses really are a tool of the television from the 50s and 60s when it was shot.
Newsreels, like the newsreels.
Yeah, so the newsreels, when you needed to be able to get from same vantage point tight shots as well as wide shots, and that's when really a lot of zooms for 16 millimeter cameras were developed.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
And then obviously technology enabled to do the same thing for the motion picture. And as we all know, back from 60s and 70s, every movie you see, it has to start from zooming in or zooming out, like every piece of equipment that gets overused. And it becomes kind of like a cliche. So the zoom basically is just a more flexible tool to get precise composition, precise framing. And prime lenses, as the name said, they're actually lenses which have set focal length. So if you are shooting on 18 or 21 or 25, 27, 32, 35, 40, or any focal length, you know that your shot will have specific perspective and specific viewing angle. And therefore, you have to, as a filmmaker, you have to understand right away in your mind before you even put a lens on a camera, what it means to put 21 millimeter or to put 14 millimeter or put 10 millimeter lens. What is the look? What's going to happen with the image if you choose one lens or another? What's going to happen with the close-up if you shoot it on 27 or if you shoot it on an 85 or maybe if you shoot it on 100 millimeter? What will be relation between your foreground elements and your background elements? There's a whole aesthetic to each of these lenses, and that's subject to a whole different podcast about aesthetics of wide or long lenses.
Sure.
But it's a known fact that many directors they have their own favorite lenses or something. Like for instance, Roman Polanski did a movie called Rosemary's Baby, pretty much with two lenses, with 18 and I think 40 millimeter lens, and everything's just that way and nothing in between.
Now, there is some downfalls to using zoom lenses. Obviously, you need more light depending on the scenario because you got more glass that light has to go through. So there is a kind of give and take. And obviously, primes give you a just very different look. But there is a little bit of a downside to zoom lens. Can you explain what the negatives are?
Yeah, basically, zoom lenses, just by its nature, they have, in order to accommodate a wide range of different viewing angles, the construction and design of optical elements is much more complex than design of the prime lenses. So therefore, there is a certain inherent light loss that there's nothing you can do about it because light travels through 20-something pieces of glass, and down when it leaves the lens and goes to your sensor, it might lose half or more of its initial amount of illumination. So you just have to, that's kind of trade-off. And also because of the large amount of glass that every zoom lens has, it's very easy to introduce certain mistakes that no matter what lens will do, certain level of distortion, certain level of flaring or loss of contrast or
breathing,
loss of
the breathing sometimes. Yeah.
There's a lot of elements that can affect the quality of certain lens. So only the highest ends, most expensive zoom lenses that can go easily up to $100,000 a piece are very much free of many of these typical mistakes you will have with the zooms. So if I can suggest anything to filmmakers, especially aspiring filmmakers, I suggest to stick with prime lenses and develop understanding what is basically aesthetic of 18 millimeter and what is aesthetic of 50 millimeter lens, and you will figure it out very soon that you do not need 50 lenses in your package, that you can actually make very interesting projects with very few lenses, as long as you understand how to properly use them.
And there are options nowadays. Before, to get a prime set of lenses used to cost, 30, 40, 50,000 or more to have a full prime set, where now There are other options like the Rokinon sets, which are very affordable. For under $2,000, you can get 5 prime lenses. Mind you, they're not going to be the same quality as a Zeiss or Zeiss or Canon or what is the other one? The other one besides Zeiss, which is the other big guy. I forgot. Not the
Fujinons,
the other one.
All Summicron lights, Leica Summicrons.
Yeah, those guys. So, but this is an unaffordable way for at least a learning tool, and you can get some pretty images out of them. They're not bad, horrible lenses, but I mean, I own a set myself, and the second I put it up against some Zeiss, I'm like, oh, or Cooks, that was the other one, or a set of Cooks, I'm like, oh, well, there's the difference. Yeah. But it's a great learning tool, and for someone starting out, I think a good way to experiment with primes. Do you agree?
Yes, absolutely, I agree. And one thing that you have to always ask yourself, okay, when you're doing a project, are you doing it for the big screen? Of course, you always have ambition whenever you're shooting something. Well, you want to end on a big screen, so you have to set your standard as high as possible. Because if you're doing something small and you're just not caring too much about what's going to be the final outcome, and you're doing something for the to be viewed on iPad or iPhone or some other portable device, well, shooting with the Fujinons or some high-end Leica, whatever, will be way overkill, and you really don't need it. But if your project ends up on being picked up and released, and somebody can see it on a big screen, everything looks great on iPad. And the moment you start going past 26-inch mark, all of a sudden, all the mistakes of the lenses are starting to be more and more obvious. So yes, you can get a decent image from Rokinons or some Kowas or some other. One interesting thing that happened lately is that a lot of cinematographers are discovering old lenses, like old Bausch and Lombs and some other old lenses, some Baltars.
Oh, the Baltars, yeah.
Yes, but these are lenses made like 50 years ago, and the reason why these lenses are now kind of popular, as well as the old Panavision lenses, which they just get reintroduced, is that through the history of technology that was basically trying to get as sharp as possible, as contrasty, as color accurate image because of the analog nature of the film, lenses have to be really sharp, really like contrasty, and get the performance to the absolutely highest specs, because dealing with the film, which is analog medium, when the light hits film grain, no matter how sharp your lens is, there's certain diffusion, certain loss of sharpness and contrast and quality that is inevitable just by the nature of the film. But with the sensors, with the digital sensors, you don't have that. You have very specific, precise photosite on your chip that is always going to be in the same place and always capture the photons which are coming through the lens. So all of a sudden, you have all these lenses. When you put them on digital sensors, they become super sharp. Mm-hmm. But they're basically overcompensated for what sensors need. So what we do now, well, we have to put some filters, some softening, all types of softening filters to kind of take away this digital electronic look.
Or you just fix it in post.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Or just buy yourself, if you're lucky on eBay, if you can still find some, old Baltars and have somebody who can actually retrofit it for you, then you'll be lucky, and you'll get actually nice set of old lenses that will work really well. So, I mean, yes, I agree that you can get very decent results, but obviously, with cheaper lenses, you have less forgiveness, which might be actually a good way to train yourself, because when you go with cheaper lenses, the moment you start going with a higher contrast, when you get flaring in the lens, well, you have to take care of it. There is no high quality coating that will eliminate any kind of flare that you might get by having highlight in the picture. So I think it's always a good way to start.
Okay, very cool. Now, I know you get asked, you teach at, which schools do you teach at right now?
I teach at USC at the School of Cinematic Arts.
Okay, and I know you have a lot of cinematography students as well. I know one of the questions they ask you all the time is, how do you get started in a cinema? Like, how do you start a cinematography career? So what would be your advice?
Well, that was kind of question I asked myself when I came to United States back in the early 90s. There are basically two ways how you break in business and how you start your career. The old Hollywood traditional way would be that you would somehow get a job in a camera department or in any department for that matter, and somehow make your way to camera department as camera intern and maybe loader, and then second assistant and first assistant, maybe operator, and then by the age you're about to retire, you might get a chance to shoot a movie as a DP, or not. But that's kind of how it is. That's kind of how it was, and nothing wrong with that. By the time you are actually DP, I mean, if you're really good, you can actually make this transition much quicker. But you had a chance at least to observe other DPs and other professionals do their job and learn it well and learn it properly.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
But still, it doesn't mean that you might make transition. You might end up being just a great operator and never make transition. Another way of becoming cinematographer in Hollywood is very interesting, is starting with light, working as a gaffer or in electric department. And basically just being a technician who deals with light and creates lights and works closely with the DP, you sharpen your skills, you learn your craft, and eventually you get a break to make transition from being gaffer and becoming a DP. And there are many great DPs in Hollywood actually took that route and became very successful cinematographers. And the third way, which is more and more popular, especially in the last decade, is basically going through the school. And depending on the school that you go, you might get really good education, you might get really well prepared, and then basically coming out of the school, you decide, okay, well, if you're a cinematographer, that's what you do. And you start by small projects and gradually create your resume and portfolio and eventually start shooting bigger projects. But my path was, when I came to LA, was basically I had to make these choices, and I simply decided not to do any of that previous that I mentioned, being taking traditional gradual way, because I felt coming from the school I was already well prepared to start as a cinematographer. But the problem is nobody can trust you when you come from the school. Nobody will trust you with their money that you can actually deliver motion picture or whatever budget it is, and you just have to be persistent and basically just keep going until your opportunity arises, and then eventually you get your feature film. After your first feature film, then things go much easier, because from this point on you're not anymore first-time cinematographer.
And it's also a long game. It's not a short game. This is not something that's going to happen in a year or two. This is something that can happen over a decade or more.
No, it doesn't have to be over a decade, but to get a chance to get to your first feature film, it took me 3 years, which I think it's normal. It's normal for somebody who comes in the town and just starts from pretty much.
Which, if I may interject, it is your cinematography debut here in America is one of my favorite films growing up, for obvious reasons. You remember that movie, I'm assuming?
But of course.
It is called Embrace of the Vampire, starring the lovely and very naked Alyssa Milano.
Yes.
As a growing up teenage boy, I thank you.
Yes, I'm happy to provide beautiful images that can stay in our minds for a long time. Yes. And also Jennifer Tilly was part of this project, as well as Martin Kemp. But that was kind of this situation when you get a chance to do your first feature film. You don't ask what it is. You don't ask,
right.
This is your chance. You have 12 days. You have to make it. And
you did that in 12 days?
In 12 days, yes.
And that was back in the was that
93. That was 93.
93.
93 or 94, I think it's about.
It was something like that. And that back then that's an obscene pace. Nowadays, that's what indie filmmakers do all the time. They make a movie in 5 or 12 days. But
yeah, that was shot on 35 with 2 cameras, two full Panavision packages. And that was one beautiful thing about being in in this town and in this business that no matter how big budget you are, you can still get the top-notch equipment, the best things, best cameras, best lenses.
Because you're in town.
Yeah, I mean, you get it. Although we shot this in Minnesota, but still.
And then you followed up with one of my other favorites, Poison Ivy.
Yes, that was yes. Actually, the sequel to original Poison Ivy, and that was also with Alyssa Milano.
Yes, it was.
Yes, and that was interesting project. But what happened after this? I did another couple films of this, I would say medium lower budget, under $5 million, and then I did a film in LA, which I'm very proud of. Not many people have seen it, but it had amazing cast, including Burt Reynolds, Keith Carradine, Pat Hingle.
I forgot about
Charles
that.
Napier. It's called The Hunter's Moon.
Oh, yes. I remember. That was beautiful. I remember seeing that on your reel back in the day. It was gorgeous.
Yes. That was a nice film that we shot all around LA, and I was very, very proud of this film. Unfortunately, it didn't get a wide release, but it was definitely one of the films that I was very, very, very proud of. And then the industry changed, obviously, later on, with the rise of tentpole movies and
those budgets are gone. Yeah,
and disappearance of medium budget films. Also, as we all know now, pretty much you have either lower budget under 3, 4, 5 million, and then 50 million and up, and that is very rarely you find any project that is in the range between 5 and 50 million. So because of the market and the way the formula works.
Now, as since you started out, doing low budget films, what can you give advice to filmmakers on a low budget to make their films look high budget? What can they do? Are there any tricks in the cinematography and possibly in post with color grading? What can they do? Any tips that they can take their film up a notch look wise?
So how to make your film notch up? How you can do this? There is only one way. You have to put yourself 110%. There is really you cannot cheat. One thing about cinematography, you cannot cheat. You cannot really. You either know or if you don't, it's obvious. It will show on the screen immediately. And you just have to trust yourself, trust your gut. And the key thing that I think it would be to be able to develop trust between you and director. You have to make sure that director trusts you and that you trust director. So that you have full support and full backup, that you are free to do whatever creatively you want to do, and not to be afraid to try to do things. And because this is how you make your mark. If you're trying to play it safe, well, it might not get you where you want to be. So you have to be able, but again, it all comes from constantly working on your skill. If you're just waiting from film to film to sharpen up your skill and raise the level of your professional experience, it's going to be a very slow process. I always suggest to my students and my friends, though, as a cinematographer, you're 24 hours a day, except when you sleep. You're a cinematographer. You have to observe things. You have to look at the things. You have to have a camera all the time. Take pictures of something that is intriguing or interesting to you. That's the key thing. So you have to have your eyes constantly working. And remember images, and when you show up on the set, you can say, oh, I remember when I saw that looked really cool, let's try this, or let's try that, let me do this. But again, you have to have a trust. How to make something look bigger than it is doesn't depend only on you, depends on many other people. I think your collaboration with other departments, with production designers, with the costume designers, is crucial that you can get support. If you don't have a set that can support your idea of having big
vision,
yes, then you will not be able to. If you have a director who doesn't understand that staging a scene just in the corner will make film look very claustrophobic and very small, versus taking it away from the wall and opening up and giving the depth, giving the space, that's all part of the process. So you can just do your part and then hope that the rest will follow.
Now, another question I know your students ask you is, how do you prepare and conduct yourself in a job interview as a cinematographer?
People think that Hollywood, or I don't like to use the word Hollywood, but let's say industry is very casual. Yes, it is casual in one way, but also it is very judgmental in many, many ways. My experience for most of the time going for the interviews was when you go for an interview, quite often depends again who are you talking to, and depends what they're expecting from you. Quite often you will be actually more asked, and you will be interviewed for the reasons not to hire you than reasons to hire you. Mm-hmm. And they will just talk to you and find out the reason why you are not the right person for the movie.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
So it's a system of elimination, basically. So you cannot, or try not to give the director, producer, or whoever else is interviewing you, not to give them a chance to eliminate you. You have to be prepared to show that you have integrity, that you have artistic vision, that you also have managerial and leadership skill, because in that position you are leader of the group. So you have to be able to communicate. You can have great idea, but if you cannot communicate, that's not going to help anybody.
Right.
Everything is important. I've done interviews where I was prepared to the maximum, bringing all kind of elements, visual reference, total analysis of the script, total analysis breakdown of the visual, creating mood books, doing all kind of stuff, because some directors really expect that you do your homework. And that can leave very, very strong impression. And I've been in a situation that, I would get a job just because they were impressed by my preparedness and my willingness and my enthusiasm to put to work and really show that I care and I'm really enthusiastic about the project. And I think enthusiasm is, the key element that you have to show. You don't have to necessarily hit all the points when you are presenting the visual concept for the film. That might be sometimes even completely different than what the director had in mind. But if the director is smart enough, he or she might realize, well, at least I'm dealing with somebody who understands, who has a visual culture, so maybe we can do something, we can come up with something interesting. I've been also to interviews where I'm simply just sitting and listening to what the director or producer have to tell me, how they want this film to be photographed and what they're expecting from me to deliver.
Got it.
There is no wrong or right, but you have to be, as a cinematographer, when you go for an interview, you have to pay attention to everything. You have to present yourself because this is your, as you know, there is no second chance for first impression. You have to leave as best impression as you can. And even if you don't get a job, if you do well on your interview, believe me, they will remember you. And they might call you for some other project, some other time, or at least if you go again for the interview, they would remember you. And so you can keep always these doors kind of open.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that advice works as well for directors going for a directing assignment or directing jobs as well. Even if it's a small indie project that they're going into direct, trying to get a job for, or larger ones. I think a lot of that stuff transfers over pretty easily and seamlessly.
Yeah, a lot of stuff. It's very much common sense, and you can, like how conduct the interview. I mean, you can even read tips. There are a bunch of books written on a subject: how conduct yourself, how prepare yourself for the interview. Any corporate job or any other office job that you go for interview. Well, of course, if you're going for interview, you don't want to show up in flip-flops and a torn T-shirt, unless this is your style, unless this is what you're going for, unless this is the message, which is nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But you might be a little bit more on, toned down note until you get a chance to show your eccentricity. And but at the end, it's really all about your work. But think about it: when you go to the interview, that means people are intrigued by your work. That's how they get your resume, and they'll look at your reel and say, "Oh yeah, I want to meet with this person." And now it's all that you have to do what's necessary to get the job.
Got it. So let me ask you a question. How do you feel about? And I know this is a question that we can go on for a whole podcast about, but how do you feel about digital taking over film?
Well, obviously this is a subject that is being discussed ad nauseum, like in the last few years.
In a few minute, like kind of a wrap up of what your feeling is, because I know we can go on for hours on this topic alone.
Well, my feeling is the same way that television didn't kill radio, and cinema is still around, even though everybody has home theater. I'm seeing digital as just a great tool that expedites the process of filmmaking, makes it far more efficient, which is true, but doesn't mean necessarily that saves you money or saves you time. There are pros and cons in one or another. What film has that digital never has and never will have, film has a level of excitement. Film has a level of mystery and magic that if you really care, that's the only way really you can have it. The quality that film has is something that generations of filmmakers are raised on, and they using film as a benchmark, as the point of reference for everything else. Even digital camera makers, manufacturers are using film and performance of the film to design their chip, so the chip can mimic look of the film, not vice versa. So I believe, and thanks to effort of many important directors, including Tarantino and J.J. Abrams, Chris Nolan, that as long as there are people of that caliber in Hollywood who have a power to say and make decisions, film will be around and valuable tool for just yet another tool for cinematographers. The show I'm working on, which I mentioned earlier, is being shot on film, and I'm sure it will be shot on film as long as the film does exist, because it is such a part of identity of the show. And switching to digital would take the whole the feeling and the flavor and the magic that has, and it's been established 5 years ago.
Very interesting. So there is still a place for film and filmmaking.
I surely believe. The only unfortunate thing is that because of the very sharp decrease in the demand that we are all witnessing, you don't have any more, lab around every corner. That's pretty much like I think one lab now, or maybe two labs, one in the East Coast, one here, and that's it. Right. So if you're shooting something, you better make sure that you have place that your film can be processed and prepared for scanning, and so it is adding additional logistic challenge, which earlier we never had to think about.
Now, what is your favorite camera to shoot with, and why?
I like different cameras for different reasons. I like, depending again on type of the project. If I'm shooting on film, my favorite camera would be Arri Cam, because it's just amazing camera, and it's pretty much, when it comes down to design of the film camera, this is like as best as it can be, and I simply could not see what else could be improved to make any camera better than Arri Cam. Unfortunately, nobody's making any film cameras anymore. Panavision always had amazing cameras, which are known for its reliability and beautiful design and precision. And to me, I think more than camera, it's really lenses, because a lens is what creates your image. Lens is what makes the picture, and then camera is just in a digital world. Camera is just computer that has actually some image capturing device, which is your sensor, and everything else is just like electronics. How you process the information created by your sensor and what you make out of it, it's your algorithm and your workflow. And I mean, yes, I could say, as far as the digital cameras, my favorite is Arri Alexa or any of the Arri digital cameras. Why? Because they made it right. They made it from the very beginning. They made a camera that is very much made for cinematographers, that the image that creates is very much even digital, but very much in its feeling and texture, very close to the sensibility of people who are used to working with the film. And when you're dealing with cameras which are made by camera manufacturers that's been doing this for decades, then you can rest assured that they know how to get it right first time.
Very cool. Now, what do you have any fun stories of working abroad? Because I know you do a lot of filming overseas.
Oh my God, I could write a book about
As you should.
my experiences in different countries, different places. Well, I think the key element. I think the key element for anybody working in different places, that's also applicable even to working in the United States, and I've shot all over the United States. Don't assume that if you go to a different place that everything will be as it is in LA. No, it's not. There is a lot of things that people do differently, and if you try to change it.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
And force them to do it your way, yeah, well, you're going to have a problem there. Because
are you talking about crew? Are you talking about crew or just
yeah, about a crew, and how you're going to handle the crew, how you're going to handle the equipment, how you're going to deal with production. There is a lot of I would say, cultural differences between places, between countries. I could maybe just mention one story that kind of comes to my mind, and it's earlier on. I was working on my second feature film in Taiwan, and that film particularly was interesting because I went to do the movie literally from the set of my Embrace of the Vampire. As we are filming last night, and the night we are finishing early in the morning, and I get in the car, went to the airport, and flew to Taiwan to do my other movie. That particular experience was very, very unique because here we are on 12-day, super fast pace, completely on adrenaline, no sleep, no nothing. You go to a place where you have a film leisurely scheduled to be shot over like 50 days. We still managed to finish it on, I think, 37 shooting days. We still had so much time that we didn't need all this time. But the challenge was working with a crew that I learned that nobody speaks English. And nobody speaks English except I had one assistant who spoke English, and he was my only liaison who kind of helped me to kind of, let me know what's going on. I was given just a storyline, what the film is about, and I will be picked up every morning in a hotel without knowing where I'm going, what I'm doing. And then when I show up on the set, they will tell me, oh, this is when we do the dinner scene. And then we will do the dinner scene. I had no idea what it's about, who's doing what, who's talking what, but somehow I will use the sign language, somehow figure it out how to light it. And one moment which I remember was we're supposed to do the scene where one of the characters sets several cars on fire. And, we did it on a backlot of the studio in Taipei. And we are just about to roll. We are just about to turn on the camera. I asked about the cars. How did they get these cars there? Just casual question, like, how did you get cars here? They said, oh, we drove them in and parked them. And okay, and did you drain the fuel? And they asked me why. And I just looked and I told them, well, you're telling me that now all the tanks are full of the fuel?
Oh, my God.
They said yes. And I said on that note, thank you guys very much. I'm going now to my hotel, and good night. And that was the first and only time I walked away from the set. Mm-hmm. Because basically I said, there is no film that is worth anybody dying or being injured just because of the, somebody's negligence, basically. And I told them that, I will be back when the fuel is drained and they have a standing by fire truck with fire extinguisher and everything, so we can actually do it properly because, I'm very safety conscious. And of course, next day, everything was there. They told me, okay, now we can go, we can shoot it. The fuel is drained. And
wow.
And I asked, okay, so where is the fire truck? And they told me, no, we don't need it. We have hand extinguishers. And I said, well,
I'll see you later.
I said, let's shoot it, but I'm just going to turn on the camera and walk away because I don't want to be even nearby, because I know how the cars burn. Mm-hmm. And of course, set the cars on fire. And of course, shortly after, cars are all full of blaze. We cut, but you could not extinguish the fires because they had just a couple of hand extinguishers, which could do nothing. And at some point, somebody, I think, from the neighborhood or whatever, actually called 911, and they sent the real fire trucks, and eventually real fire trucks came. But I think what happened is production really didn't want to spend money on real fire trucks, so they realized they're going to come anyway, so let's just go.
Right.
So yes, we did get shot. Nobody fortunately got injured, but that was a lesson I learned, and it was something that I will remember.
So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit with the last two questions.
Okay.
Who is the best cinematographer of all time and why?
Well, that's a very tough question. That's a very tough question because every cinematographer you ask will tell you different story and the reason why. Mm-hmm. It depends how far you want to go. If you want to go in the days of old Hollywood, Greg Toland comes to mind, like a legendary cinematographer from his collaboration with Orson Welles and some other directors. Obviously, there's some amazing cinematographers from the time of golden era of Hollywood, from golden Technicolor.
Let's say current era.
Well, I would say probably maybe not the greatest, but probably the most influential would be probably Vittorio Storaro, who actually I had a chance to meet recently, although I've known his work since I was a kid. And probably Vittorio Storaro because being European cinematographer who worked all over the world, he maintained his vitality from the early days from his first films to his latest film that he just finished in Iran, which I was able to actually see at a special screening last week. When you look at his work, he's always innovative. He's always pushing the limit. He's never the same. He always does things differently. And but not only he does things differently, he sets the bar very high to everybody else. He has incredible visual culture. He has incredible visual aesthetics that he knows how to apply and incorporate in every film that he does. And anything from Conformist, Last Tango in Paris, One from the Heart, Apocalypse Now, Boulevard. Even TV series Dune that he did about 10 years ago, and some small films in Europe that nobody has ever seen, and including this film from Iran about Prophet Muhammad, which was just a big epic film that he did just, of course, amazing, masterful job. So to me, this is somebody, that's what cinematographers should be. Always fresh, always innovative, always pushing the limit. So I would say single-handedly probably Storaro would be my choice of the most, not the greatest, but probably the most influential cinematographer.
Now, this is a question I ask all of my guests, and it's always a tough question, so just do the best you can. What are your top 3 films of all time? Not in any order.
Top 3 films probably would be Blade Runner.
Yep.
Lawrence of Arabia.
Okay.
And the third film would be Abyss, The Abyss.
Really? The Abyss? You put that on your top 3?
That's my top 3, and I have personal reasons for this because...
Tell me.
Lawrence of Arabia is a film that I saw as a child, and I also have a fourth film, also Enter the Dragon.
Oh wow! You're really wow.
These are the films which made important impact on me in different phases of my life. Enter the Dragon was probably the film that, going this way, was a film that I don't think any other film made such impact on me that made me really believe that I'm invincible like Bruce Lee. I watched the movie and like, well, he can do it, I can do it. I completely identify myself. It has nothing to do with cinematography or anything, but it just the power of cinema, the way as a kid I experienced Enter the Dragon, to me that was unbelievable. So yes, I'm not ashamed to say Enter the Dragon was an important film of my childhood.
Absolutely.
Second important film was Lawrence of Arabia. I've seen it also as a kid, and no other film that I've seen so far had such a strong ability to transform and really transform me and my whole experience, and made me really believe that I'm right there in the desert with Lawrence and Omar Sharif and all these other characters, and just experiencing it. And of course, later on I realized, well, it's because of just amazing cinematic work of everybody, of course, including Freddie Young as a cinematographer.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
The third film was a Blade Runner. And Blade Runner came at a time in my life when I was deciding, okay, what should I do? What's my path? I was in my teenage days and very much interested in photography. And then when I saw this film, I realized that just how photography in this particular film was so powerful and played such an important role in the storytelling and overall feeling of that movie. I felt that's something that I would like to do. I would be able to. I wish I could be able to do to create images that are so powerful in storytelling that you can watch the movie without even listening to dialogue. And then fourth film, I did actually 4 films to this list, is The Abyss. Abyss came in my life when I was finishing my school, or I was about to finish my film school. And I know it was very controversial, but maybe there was a point when I was just in special particular mood to watch something like this and to get this underwater adventure, Space Odyssey underwater. And just whole experience of what's happening under the water and the world underwater and just all this drama that was happening. It was, to me, just amazing. But what really hit me was the fact that there was probably a moment of realization that I will never be able to make movies like this. that I just wasted 4 years of my life. And I'm really now in trouble because I have no choice. Now I have to stick to it because there's no way back.
So basically, it had the opposite effect of Enter the Dragon.
Yes, very much. It was as much as I loved the movie, it was also like wake-up call for me realizing that I'm on the wrong path.
Interesting how film works with people. My Blade Runner story is I'm shameful to say that I finally sat down and watched Blade Runner for the first time about 8 years ago. And before then, I had always seen clips of it here and there. And when I was working in a video store when I was in high school, it's just one of those I just never got around to. It was always one of those, I got to watch it. But when I saw it, it was mesmerizing in a way that it jumped to the top 5 list of all time for me instantly. Just the cinematography, the story, the world that Ridley Scott put together. It was just, every frame was a painting. It was gorgeous. I'd never seen a film so gorgeous. It's just stunning. Like, it was just amazing how Ridley was able to do that. And the cinematographer, remind me who the cinematographer was?
Jordan Cronenberg.
Yes. I remember, I think it was you that told me that you saw his reel once, and his reel was just the titles of the movies he did.
Well, when you reach a certain point in your career, you do not need a reel. However, you might get in a situation that sometimes, especially with some young cinematographers, young directors, they would
right.
Simply ask for reel of Alan W. or
Yeah, and it's funny to say, but his response to that was, "Oh, I did Blade Runner. Here's the titles for it. I just found that funny. I have interesting
little anecdote. I think it has to do with Alan Dario, but basically I think the anecdote is about very experienced cinematographer who has done 50-something films, and he was working with some very young and first-time or very enthusiastic director. So they came to the set. He came to the set. He put his cane and just stood there resting on his cane. And the director was going all over the place with his viewfinder, checking, going here and there. And at some point came to him where he was standing, and he said, actually, I think the camera will be here. And Alan responded, yes, that's why I put my cane here.
There is something to say about experience.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And for all the young filmmakers, if you ever have opportunity to work with people that are more experienced, use it to your advantage, because there is always something that you can learn, and have people to contribute. Don't be afraid. I remember one of the directors I worked with on several occasions told me interesting detail from his career. He told me that when he started as a director, he always needed to leave impression that he knows what he's talking about, and
insecurity, right.
Absolute authority, that nobody's questioning him, which is fine. And then it reached a point when he was on his 5th film that he realized that actually it's perfectly okay to show up and say that, I don't know what we want to do here, but let's come up with something, and nobody would take it personally.
Right. It's insecurity when you're first starting out.
Yeah, it's this eagerness to show that you are absolutely in control, you are absolutely dominating,
but that's for any young person. As a general sum.
It comes with the territory. I think as a director and the level of pressure and responsibility, you need to even convince yourself that you know what you're doing, even though quite often you're clueless. But if you're smart, as some famous director said once, like the key to success of a director is to surround himself with talented people and let them do their job.
Correct. Absolutely correct. Suki, I won't take up any more of your time. Thank you so much for being on the show. You were a lot of great gems and nuggets of information in this episode. I think a lot of people get a lot of use out of it. So is there anything else you want to say?
Just go ahead and shoot something.
Okay. Never better said, my friend. We'll talk soon, my friend. Thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you.
I hope you guys got a lot out of that episode. I know I did. I know cinematography is almost kind of like a black art to a lot of filmmakers. They don't understand what it takes to actually make a good image. And that's one of the problems with a lot of independent films is they just grab a camera and they go shoot something sometimes, and they don't take the time to hire a good DP or understand what good lighting is. And I hope this episode kind of shined a light, no pun intended, on the importance of cinematography, the art of cinematography, and what it really takes to create amazing images. So don't forget to head over to filmfestivaltips.com. That's filmfestivaltips.com to get my 6 secrets on how to get into film festivals for cheap or free. These 6 secrets help me get into over 500 international film festivals for cheap or free. And please head over to iTunes and give the podcast a honest review. It helps us out dramatically in getting more exposure for the show, and we really appreciate you guys doing that for us. It does help us out dramatically with the rankings on iTunes and help us get more listeners and get the word out on the Indie Film Hustle movement. So thanks again, guys. We will be bringing you a great new show next week. Stay tuned. We got some amazing guests coming up and some couple other things I might be doing in the future with our podcast that you guys might be excited about. So stay tuned, and remember, keep that hustle going. Never stop following your dreams. Talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Indie Film Hustle podcast at indiefilmhustle.com. That's INDIEFILMHUSTLE.com.